And our meeting tonight is now open for sharing testimonies of healing through Christian Science. Janet from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks so much for this beautiful, uplifting service. I'm so very grateful to God who has been guiding me during a very challenging time. I'm doing things I never thought I'd be able to do. I'm driving to areas I'm unfamiliar with. I'm receiving help from people who appeared when least expected and finding important items I've been looking for months. At times, I find myself lacking confidence in many of the tasks that were set before me. But with the continued support of my practitioner, who expresses God's love and patience towards me, I'm learning that my need is to be confident in God, not myself or anyone else, turning completely to Him with all my needs that are to being taken care of now, as always. I'm so grateful for Christ Jesus, our dear leader, Mary Baker Eddy, and the Field Church. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Karen from California, go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you for those readings, Craig. One of the lessons that I have learned since returning to the study of Christian Science is that whatever God calls us to do, it is because He has prepared us to do it. Soon after joining Plainfield Church, I heard about the book 500 Watching Points by Gilbert Carpenter and ordered it. My grandfather had had these watching points in the material that I inherited after his passing, but they were all typewritten, and I did not realize what I had, so I did not keep them. But apparently, I was to have them, because when I learned after coming to Plainfield Church how important it was for students of Christian Science to have this book and others by him. No sooner had I started looking at the book than I was asked if I would consider choosing the daily watches. I said yes, but had no idea how to do this. I did know that it was what God wanted me to do, if He had prepared me for it, and would show me how to do it. I had some very loving help from a member to get me started, and I was on my way. I have learned so much from doing this work, and look forward each week to see what God's message is for all of us. I have always enjoyed reading to children. When I was teaching, I read to the school children, and later to my own children. When I was asked if I would like to record articles for the church's website, I wanted very much to do that, but not quite sure how. I learned about a recording app, and that got me started. There has been much learning by trial and error, but God always showed me how to meet every obstacle. Again, I knew that I was asked because I had been prepared by God to bless others in this way. At times over the years, I would be asked to scan a document and send it in an email. I would always give the excuse that I didn't know how to do it and would either fax or mail whatever I needed to. I eventually realized that that was unacceptable, and I set about learning how to do it. It is so easy for me now that I even do it for my husband when he needs it. When I was asked if I would record the biography series by Doris Greco, I had just bought the books a few months earlier and kept looking over at them on my bookshelf, wondering when I was going to find the time to read them. Then I was asked if I would start recording them. I saw this as a wonderful opportunity to finally read the biography, but quite frankly wondered how to manage reading out of a book rather than off the computer, which I had been used to. How was I going to keep from making noise while turning pages? Again, God revealed to me how I was going to do this. It came to me to scan each chapter and read it from my iPad. That was the answer. I was so grateful for this inspiration. These have all been wonderful opportunities for me to turn to God with humility and gratitude and make them demonstrations of God's omnipresent love. We do have to be certain that when we are asked to do something, that we get self out of the way and ask God if what we have been asked to do is His desire for us. If it is, and we say yes, rather than giving excuses or reasons why we can't, we are blessed beyond our imagination. I am so grateful for Christian Science that teaches us who we are as God's self-expression and the power that we have been endowed with as God's idea to overcome all limitations that the so-called carnal mind or mortal mind would put upon us to keep us from the blessings awaiting us when we do His will. I am grateful to God, to Christ Jesus, and to our leader, Mary Baker Eddy, and for the loving support of my practitioner. Good evening.
Thank you. Tom from Iowa, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Craig, for those good readings. I am very grateful to Christ Jesus for His perfect example of Christianity. I am also grateful to Mary Baker Eddy for her writings and bringing to the world this wonderful science. I'm also thankful that this church is perpetuating their sacred teachings and putting them before the world. And thanks be to my holy practitioner and her pure prayers, and to her for helping me to a better understanding and practice of this religion. I am forever the debtor to God, as Miss Eddy once said of herself, and desire to serve, obey, and love God more every day. Thank you and have a good night.
Thank you. Mara from Mississippi, go ahead.
Hello. Thank you, Craig, for the reading tonight. Last week I started a testimony about how my tiny new kitten got severely injured. He was in obvious extreme pain, judging by his behavior. I pinpointed his injury to be his rib. Even though I was very concerned and worried at first and contemplated taking him to the vet, I decided I would pray about it. At one point in the night, I became anxious again, thinking that this problem was too serious for me to pray about, and I doubted myself. Then I remembered the multiple healings of my pets that I had experienced through Christian Science in the few years that I've been learning Christian Science at Plainfield. I knew this feeling of doubt and anxiety was not from God, but instead animal magnetism. I knew that in order to help my kitten, I needed to have faith and trust God. I also remembered a recent testimony given on a Wednesday night about a woman who found a bird that flew into her window and was severely injured and dying. I thought about how she said she talked to the bird and she could tell the bird understood. I began to talk to my kitten and tell him that he was God's, not mine. I could see he was listening to me when I was speaking to him. I knew that God does and will do the healing for this kitten. I told him there are no accidents in divine mind. I also told him that nothing could touch him but God. I let him go and gave him to God to heal. He began to settle and fell asleep. I slept on and off and prayed the whole night. I didn't just pray for the kitten, but anyone and everyone I could think of. I prayed for my daughter, who had a persistent rash that kept spreading all week. In the morning when I woke up and got out of bed, the kitten was completely fine. He played, jumped, ate, and behaved like a kitten with no signs of any pain whatsoever. I also found out later that day that my daughter's rash went away as well. I am so grateful for my practitioner, her patience, support, and love that she shows to me and my family. I'm so happy to learn that God is always there for us. I'm grateful to Craig and Mary Baker Eddy for Christian Science, and also very thankful to everyone at Plainfield for all you do. Have a great night.
Thank you. Shardy.
Good evening. My gratitude tonight is for our Plainfield Independent Church, Christian Science Church. When I sat down to write my gratitude, I thought of several individual things. and realized that none of the things could have happened without my practitioner and the church in total. How precious and special are all the events, services, and contributions and everything that goes on in unbroken, harmonious rhythm every day to bless the whole world, the whole world. Many people from all over God's kingdom are working, watching, and praying, night and day. Love is unstoppable, which is proven here. Carry on, carry on. We always have challenges, of course, but we pull together, work together, and go forward, where healings and demonstrations occur on a daily basis, which are shared on Wednesdays, just like tonight. So I thank all of you who play a part, big or small, in this glorious church, Plainfield Christian Science Church, Independent. And I had a healing where I did not give a gratitude. I didn't realize it was a protection. That's what I've learned here, to have deep gratitude. So I stopped and I thought about this. Now, where I had hurt myself, my hand, I realized that I didn't give the gratitude, and I looked at my hand and it was starting to swell where I had supposedly injured it, and it had not happened. And then a bump occurred. So I really got to work on what real gratitude is, deep gratitude. And everything went away. And I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Benjamin.
I'm very grateful to be here tonight. On Saturday, I was over here in the print room to do some printing, and it was a particular printing that I've done many times before, so it shouldn't be a problem. But this time it was a problem. And I tried everything that I thought I knew, but it wasn't printing properly the way it was supposed to come out. I tried so many times. It wasn't coming out. Then frustration started to creep in. To say the least. Then I stopped. I decided maybe I will do it some other time. And I logged out and decided to go home. I sat in my car in the parking lot instead of going home. Then I sat in the car and started doing something I should have done early. I sat calmly and started to pray, asking God to give me His wisdom to do His work. And after a few minutes, I was sitting down in quietness. The answer came that God cannot give us any task without the wisdom to accomplish it. As I think about that truth and knowing that truth, and also knowing that we should not, in any circumstance, rely on our own understanding, but complete reliance on God for His wisdom. As I thought through those things, the message came to me and told me, get back in there. Tell me, get back in there and do what God wants me to do. Then I get back inside the church, right inside the print room, and turn the computer back on again. And as I look at the screen, and there was the solution right there in front of me, which, I've been there for like 10 times at least. I couldn't see it. And it was right there, that little thing to click. And I just click it and send it go. And it started printing, and I never had any interruption again until all the papers were printed. I'm so grateful to God, what I'm learning in this church, to listen to God and not depend on my own understanding, no matter how much I thought I know something. The best way to know something is to know that God is the one that is guiding you, not my own knowledge. And when we do that, things work beautifully for us. I'm so grateful for this teaching and for everything that God is teaching me here in this church and all the blessings that comes with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Luba from Ohio, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm grateful for this week's lesson on matter. Every word brought me more peace of mind, especially the words, "Wait on the Lord, be of good courage, and he shall strengthen thy heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord." Another passage was, "That will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee." In recent days, I have been experiencing dental pain, and I called my practitioner after that. She stated that my teeth are deeply rooted and grounded in God's love. She said to work with this continuously all day. She added that God loves me too much and that I should stay in the secret place of the Most High and to always keep my thought on God only. This has been such a blessing to me as I have continued to work on this truth. And as always, I'm most grateful to my steadfast, loving practitioner. Thank you so much, and I'm grateful to be here this evening.
Thank you. Barbara from Pennsylvania, go ahead.
Good evening. Last week, my husband had an appointment that he felt unsure if it was right to keep or not. I wasn't very sympathetic or helpful until very early the morning of the appointment when it came to me that it wasn't right for him to keep it. I suggested that if he now felt it wasn't right to go, he didn't have to, that we could still call through, though we thought it would be too late to cancel and too early to get anyone on the phone. As it turned out, it was no problem at all. The law of God is wonderful, helping us right where we need the help. We do have to obey, though. A few important reasons as to why canceling had been a right idea became apparent immediately after making that call. Then, a few days later, we found that the appointment was no longer necessary at all. The proof is in the pudding. Thank you, God. Thank you, Plainfield, for persisting in your mission. Also, thank you to a fellow church member who gives us needed and loving support. Thank you, and good night.
Thank you. Andrea from Idaho, go ahead.
Hello, I'd like to express my gratitude for a healing that I had this past week. I have been having many days of quiet over the last couple months, and I have been increasing my study and working toward a goal of studying 4 hours a day. I've been reading through the Bible, using a Bible commentary to finish it from one end to the other. And in these activities, I have been finding that when I am not studying, I seem to be under some kind of attack of a voice constantly bringing up history and bad memories and different types of discord and disharmony, and even to the point where I can't sleep because this voice is just constantly bringing up fears and upsetting me greatly. And I recently had received in the Plainfield daily emails a message about that talks about the conscious mind and the unconscious or subconscious mind, and makes some distinctions between those two things. And it occurred to me that that's where this was coming from. And also reminded me of a Bicknell Young lecture that I had listened to that had been recorded on the Plainfield website that spoke about his experience when he had had a near-death experience, and he felt the accuser had come into his thought and just really aggressively attacked him. And I was, through the inspiration, was able to put these two things together and to realize that that was what's happening. That this belief of having a quiet thought and not having a lot to do and studying a lot was sort of attracting this into consciousness, this kind of an attack. And I think having it self-seen was a huge step in recognizing that it was doing nothing but trying to prevent me from doing my study and nothing but trying to prevent me from hearing God in my quiet time. And these two things helped me to see that and to realize that there would be nothing that God would be doing that would be trying to prevent me from hearing Him or from studying or from praying or from having quiet thought or bringing my sins to remembrance, so to speak, to divide me from Him. And this recognition stopped it, just stopped it. And I've gratefully been able to study and feel enthusiastic about studying and just drinking it in and sleeping again. And any thoughts that I know aren't from God, I'm just kicking them out. And it's really helping. And I wanted to express my gratitude for this experience and this growth and for the different articles that are available for us to study through this church. Thank you.
Thank you. Betty from California, go ahead.
Good evening. I want to say thank you for the music tonight and also for the readings. That's one of my favorite stories about Nehemiah. Tonight, I really want to express gratitude for help from the Weather Committee for their work on the 3 wildfires burning in Southern California. When the first one started, the weather was just really hot, dry, windy. Within a day or two after the Weather Committee began working, the weather has cooled down quite a bit. The humidity has gone up, and the wind has calmed down. One fire has now around 50% containment, and it was only at 5% when they were first contacted about a week ago. And the other 2 are now around 35-40% containment. And all 3 are now moving much, much slower. And I am just so grateful for this. I've never seen the weather cool down like that, especially in September. To me, this just shows the power of prayer as taught here in Christian Science. And I am so grateful for the continued work of the Weather Committee on this. Thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you. Debbie from Illinois, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm very grateful for our one divine mind, the one divine mind, and its constant unfoldment. On Monday of this week, when I first listened to our daily watch, when I got to the end of it, I was like, oh, I have no idea what that means. And followed with that was a sense of frustration. Immediately I heard, no, that is not true. So I went back, and between Monday and today, I have listened to the daily watch multiple times every day, studying it and knowing that an understanding is there right now. I'm very grateful that I can say as of this morning, it has become much clearer, the message in our daily watch. And I will continue to listen to it and study it and know that it will become clearer and clearer in my thoughts and become more permanent in my consciousness. Very grateful for our church, for our Father, for Mary Baker Eddy, and for all of the truths that we have to live by. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeremy.
What a great blessing it is to be here learning Christian Science in this church. My vehicle needed a new state inspection sticker this month. In New Jersey, you can go to a garage and pay a fee to get the sticker, but they also have state-provided public stations that have many lanes ready to take people for free. The very first time I went, not long after getting here in Plainfield, went to the station at a convenient time for me without praying at all, and I ended up in line for around 40 minutes. And I remember feeling very uneasy the whole time. But now, after being a member of this church for many years and having regular practitioner support, I've learned to pray before, during, and after all things. So at the end of August, I started seeing that the time was close for the inspection, and I began praying that God would let me know the right time to go, and expecting that if I was truly listening, the experience would go smoothly. Well, yesterday, after lunch, it felt right to go, and upon arriving at the mostly empty station, the vehicle was taken right in by a very kind and competent worker, and in around 10 minutes, I was on my way. Now, I've been a member of this church a while, and have been doing my best to live this science each day, but it still feels like such a momentous occasion when I can clearly see God's hand guiding me through these situations. The way that God shows his love to us when we are willing to obediently follow is just wonderful. So I'm very grateful for all I've learned here and for God's ever-presence and all power. Thank you. And now we have a testimony from Imogen in Australia.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight I would like to give thanks to this precious independent Christian Science church, to its workers from the past who won our right to independently worship God in Christian Science, according to Mary Baker Eddy. I am particularly grateful for the writings of our early workers that have been rescued from being destroyed. Writings of Bicknell Young, Martha Wilcox, Edward Kimball, Peter V. Ross, Reverend Kratzer, amongst many others, not to mention the writings of Doris White Evans, Florence Roberts, and David Keaston. One of the pieces of work that I have been given at this church recently is to proofread half of a very precious book entitled Lectures and Articles on Christian Science by Edward A. Kimball. This is another truly precious book that would have been lost were it not for the concerted efforts of this church. I thank the church worker who has faithfully typed up this book of 492 pages. You did a splendid job on it. It is evident in reading this book that these are the words of a truly holy practitioner of significant standing. I feel very honoured to be doing this small task. I have found the writings of Edward Kimball reveal a wonderful, strategic and analytical thinker with a precise and surgical understanding of Christian Science. His explanations are enlightening and profound, and yet his writings are so full of love for God, love for Christian Science and his fellow man, and love for our dearest Mary Baker Eddy. There are a number of passages when he speaks of learning from Mrs. Eddy and knowing her, and the divine impact that her teachings and example had upon him. He writes, quote, "I never knew one who was more just, loving and humble than Mrs. Eddy. I never knew one who seemed more intent on knowing the will of God, or more glad and satisfied to do that will. I never knew one who was more honest, more charitable, more wise, or more kind. Her many years of consecrated Christian experience have ripened into godly reverence and devotion for the life which is in imitation of Christ. Her chief ambition seems to be to battle against sin and disease and to continue without reproach before God and man. Some day the world will know all this and render tardy justice, and meanwhile the tender, loving woman knoweth that more than 1 million people, many of them once dying, who have been rescued from unspeakable depths, are giving thanks because she has been faithful." End quote. Christian Science brings a precious and powerful relationship that we can have with our God here and now, where God is no longer a mystery, or, quote, not a God afar off. So thank you to our dear and holy practitioners, both past and present at this church, that we can freely worship God according to the Christ Science discovered by Mary Baker Eddy. Thank you all so much, and so much love to you all.
Thank you. Florence from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Craig, for the readings tonight and also for the hymns. This is a testimony from Maryland, from Frances, and she says this. This testimony expresses gratitude for a demonstration of God's glorious goodness. Last week, the lie suggesting itself before dawn and continuing once I was up was that something uncomfortable was going on in a part of my body. In prayer to treat this unexpected claim of discord, the thought revealed was that this false belief came from nowhere because it was nothing, and that something doesn't need to happen to improve something that never happened. Because part of the claim was that the discomfort was especially noticeable when I needed to bend, I worked with the first verse of Mary Baker Eddy's poem Love, which reads, "Brood o'er us with thy sheltering wings, 'neath which our spirits blend. Like brother birds that soar and sing, and on the same branch bend. The arrow that doth wound the dove darts not from those who watch and love." I declared that I was under love's wing, and rather than bending, I was blending with spiritual sense, with the truth of spiritual being, and that I could not feel the darts of aggressive mental suggestion as I persistently watched, thought, and expressed love. I mentioned this false claim in conversation with my Plainfield practitioner, who reminded me that if the thoughts that come to mind are not of God, they have nothing to do with me, and that my faith needs to remain in God, the only one, the all in all. I am grateful for this healing that corrected a false belief which, after a phone conversation, stopped trying to grab my attention. My normal freedom of movement has continued during the ensuing days. Additionally, I often express mentally my immense gratitude for the rich resources provided by this independent Christian Science church to promote the spiritual education of those who our dear leader terms in our textbook, honest seekers for truth. Earlier this year, 2 individuals with whom I had slight acquaintance mentioned their health challenges. Although neither of them had been aware of Christian Science, each one was receptive to my offer to give them a copy of Science and Health. I think that's so beautiful. I really feel very strongly that the time has come for Mrs. Eddy's revelation to the world to be shared to bless all mankind. I pray all the time for God to lead us to share with all ready to receive it. I'm so grateful to be here tonight.
Thank you. Mary.
Good evening, everyone. A couple of testimonies to read tonight. The first is from a friend we have who lives in Switzerland, and he often relays to me these day trips he takes in the beautiful area in which he lives. And he asked tonight if I would sort of give this testimony for him that he told me about today. He was taking a trip into the countryside. It was crossing the border from Switzerland to France and visiting this old ancient town there. It sounded very beautiful. It had originally been founded by Julius Caesar, so it was very old, and it was on a river. And when he went there, it was a Sunday afternoon. He went with a friend, and the town area where they wished to walk around and look had been all cordoned off. You couldn't go by car. So he had to park his car and then walk a distance. And he said he hadn't really walked much in several years, and he found it difficult. So he felt a little challenged at first, but he decided that nothing would interrupt the harmony of that day. So as he went about, first one of his feet began to be very aching, but he was knowing the truth about it, that nothing could interrupt the harmony of that time, and that pain and discomfort left. And then they stopped at a little cafe, he and his friend, to have a coffee. And as they were sitting there, there was a young family nearby with a little baby and then maybe a little toddler. And the toddler was crying off and on. And then all of a sudden, this toddler began to really, really cry, very upset and very loudly and very disruptively. But this person said he was just going to pray and not react and know that God's angels surrounded this little fellow and all was well. And he said as he was praying that way, this little boy suddenly locked eyes with him and just was looking at him in a most intent manner. And so the man felt that the child wanted something from him. So he said to this little boy, now that's not a very intelligent way to behave. And all of a sudden that little boy just stopped crying. And I mean, just from practically screaming to not crying. And the parents looked in amazement because they had been trying all kinds of things to get him to stop crying, bouncing him around and doing various things that parents do. And they asked the man if he could go home with them. So the man said, well, no, but he said, but I will tell you, that this little fellow is an intelligent idea, and to speak intelligently to him, and they might have good success. And I thought, when he was telling me this, it reminded me of Mrs. Eddy, where she says in Science and Health, because man is the reflection of his maker, he is not subject to birth, growth, maturity, decay. These mortal dreams are of human origin, not divine. And so he was proving this, that little child was at the state of maturity could listen and be peaceful and still, and he was. And then the man said, it's just so wonderful how we can take our science with us wherever we go. We bless ourselves, and then we bless everyone else that we come in contact with. And that is certainly very true. So I was grateful for that testimony, and then one other from California. I would like to express gratitude for a healing I received on Monday morning. The day was very hot, as I said about putting up a 9-foot patio umbrella in my yard to provide some shade for my flowers and house. I was barefooted because the idea of putting up the umbrella was not planned out ahead of time. As I was running about between the yard and my garage, one thing led to another, and I rammed one of my toes into a brick planter. An immediate thought came, berating me for not wearing shoes, and as usual, because this has happened on one occasion in the past, the toe was going to be either broken or very sore and bruised. I had just come out from reading my Bible lesson on substance with all of its uplifting angel messages, so I knew that I was not made of things which do appear. That's a quote from the Bible. I needed to reverse the thoughts of pain and suffering, which I knew didn't come from God. As soon as I did this, all kinds of healing truths followed, that God was always present with me, that I couldn't dash my foot against a stone, the 91st Psalm, because I was under God's constant care and could never be separated for a moment from His watchful eye. Ignoring the temptation to check out my toe, after entertaining all these spiritual truths, my heart filled with joy as I thought about how much I love God and how much He loved me. My activities continued as usual, although I did go inside to put on my shoes. In the evening, after taking the dogs for their 3-mile walk, my toe came to thought, but there was nothing to think about. I'm so grateful for this Plainfield Christian Science Church Independent, for its teachings on Christian Science, and for awakening my thought. My love to you all. So thank you very much for the readings tonight, Craig, and for this beautiful testimony meeting. So good to hear you all using and practicing this very practical science. So much love to you all, and have a good night.
Thank you.